Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the award-winning Recovery Podcast, Getting the Herd, brought to you by the McShin Foundation. Today, our special guest is Becky Bowers-Lanier. Becky, I love having you on the show. Welcome back. We were discussing earlier, right before the show, the last time you were on the show was last year on the 14th of January. So clearly, something in my head says the General Assembly session is beginning. Let's talk to Becky. So, Becky, welcome to the show. What is your take on the Virginia General Assembly 2022?
Well, that's a great question, Nathan.
A bit loaded.
Yeah, it is loaded. As you know, we have had a change in leadership in the House of Delegates, with Republicans taking over, holding 52 seats to 48 seats for the Democrats. And that has put Todd Gilbert into the Speaker's role and Terry Kilgore into the Majority Leader role. And our former Speaker, Eileen Fillercorn, is now Minority Leader for the House. That also changes all the committees. And so if any of our listeners who had been interested in certain committees advancing issues for them, they should check the committee membership so that they can see. But even though the committees, the membership of the House and of the House is close, Democrats and Republicans, clearly the Republicans hold the majority, and they hold the majority sometimes by a fair amount of each of the committees. Now, the Democrats did the same thing to them when they took over 2 years ago. And so, this is turnabout as fair play, and that's the way it goes. I think also the good news is that it looks to me like the Republican leadership and the Democrats have made fairly good strategic decisions about who will be on committees. And so I was at the Health, Welfare, and Institutions Committee meeting this morning, and I felt comfortable, at least some degree of comfort, in looking at the people who are on the committee. Now, sure, there are some people whose political ideologies are pretty much down on a continuum. If I'm on one end, they're kind of on the other end. But most of the people, I think, are moderate. Most of the people do want to work together. And most of the people are definitely interested in the health and welfare of Virginia citizens. And so I'm comforted by that. Now, having said that, that is the only committee that's met so far. And as we speak, the Committee on Commerce and Energy, which used to be called Commerce and Labor until the Democrats took over and made it Labor and Commerce, it's now Commerce and Energy. That committee is meeting today. So we're just in the beginning of how the committees will do their work, if that helps in describing.
For clarification, Becky, HWI, the committee
is... sorry. Health, Welfare, and Institutions.
Health, Welfare, and under HWI, there are some important government functions, one of those being DBHDS. Is that correct?
Well, no.
Well, I'm sorry. How does that work out?
DBHDS, we've got the three branches of government. Right. Here we go back to Civics 101, which I hated, by the way, and usually read Time magazine when I was sitting in civics. And that came around to bite me later on in my life. And now I spend most of my time dealing with government. So yes, they deal with issues that have to do with recovery, for example, behavioral health, mental health conditions, developmental disabilities. So yes, they actively work on policies related to that executive branch agency, as they do somewhat with the Department of Medical Assistance Services, which is the Medicaid agency. But a lot of the stuff in the Medicaid agency, because its funding is dealt with by what we call the money committees in the House and the Senate. So, but yes, you're right. The policies that come out from Health, Welfare, and Institutions are ones that are managed in the executive branch agencies dealing with behavioral health, aging and rehabilitative services, the Department of Health, Virginia Department of Health, social services, which deals with TANF and food stamps and those sorts of things. So all of those for the most part, most of those policy making kinds of things filter through that committee. The other committee that deals with them in the House is Courts of Justice, because when some of the things that within in the recovery community, we have individuals who have intersected with policies that come out of Courts of Justice, and that committee has not met yet. But I have to say, I'm a little concerned about how that committee will work.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm concerned is that for the past 2 years, I think we've made huge progress in parity social justice issues, and how we work with people in recovery and how we envision people in recovery as being on a recovery journey. And that has led to expungement policies, sealing of records, more continued discussions on how we deal with barrier crimes and those challenges to hiring for people who have records. So the Republicans, especially the new chairman of that committee, tend to be more law and order types. And I have seen bills that have been filed that look like they're rolling back what happened in the past 2 years. Mm. The good news is, and this is a wonky thing, and I apologize to our listeners, but the good news is that the Senate composition remains the same. So while we have a majority Republicans in the House of Delegates, we have a slim majority of Democrats in the Senate. And that sort of means that crazy stuff that may come out of the House has to make it through the Senate before it gets sent to the governor. Mm-hmm. And the governor, as we know, is a Republican. So no pressure on the Senate, but there's a lot of pressure on the Senate.
Well, and Becky, as you know, the color of recovery is purple, and so many of the issues, I vote pretty much a certain way. I think I know which way you pretty much vote. However, there are certain issues which transcend party, and as you know,
absolutely,
a lot of these issues are embedded in these two committees and even the subcommittees. Because I think of health subcommittee, I think of, well, all right, maybe Courts of Justice might be a little more divisive, but I think of the health subcommittee. I think some of the bills that are coming out right now, you look at, Carrie Coyner carrying, previously she carried a recovery high school for Chesterfield, she's a Republican who represents Chesterfield, a delegate. Nick Freitas, who has a couple of bills which are favorable, very favorable to the allocation of funding and the composition of the Cannabis Board and the Opioid Abatement Authority Board, which are favorable to the recovery community. In general, some of that, we talked about this right beforehand, and some of the specific issues and how they relate to DBHDS and the funding for CSBs. For the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, and for community service boards, which are under that, the funding for those things kind of this gets really wonky right here, this conversation.
It does.
And it gets a little bit really, really into the weeds. But what I find, the more and more that I interact with people, on any side of the aisle, or people who walk right on the aisle, I find that there's way more that brings us together than tears us apart.
Yes.
I might also be saying that because we now have a House of Delegates on the Republican side and a governor who's a Republican. But
it hasn't always been that way. And I've been around for a while to see, I would not call it a transformation, but it's close to being a transformation in how policymakers who are relatively conservative, who may in the past have perceived substance use disorder as a moral failing, I think for the most part are moving away from that. And I think back, where were the seminal moments when I heard presentations that seemed to generate an aha moment, perhaps, in people who were thinking about this. And so I'm heartened by that. Even Nick Freitas is the fund, the recovery fund. I mean, Nick is a real hardcore conservative, and so for him to be putting that bill in says to me that he's made a bit of a transformation. Been on a transformation journey, and I don't know what the catalysts are. I don't care. It's good that it's happened. Um, and it would be nice if I could say that everybody who used to think that substance use disorder emanated from a moral failing no longer believes that. I do think it's still there. And so there are ways that we can frame messages to them that may more resonate with them than those who think that substance use disorder is a brain disease and that people are on a chronic recovery journey for the rest of their lives. I have diabetes, I'm recovering every day. I'm never going to get over my diabetes, but I have learned to live with it. And so while I'm not recovering from substance use, I think I understand pretty well what it means to live with something on a moment by moment basis. Actually, always thinking, always have to think, is my blood sugar okay? Do I need to do something with it? So it's that kind of thing. And I think I'm digressing just a bit, but my concern is I would love to see that everybody now embraces the thinking that people in recovery are on a journey that it's not a straight line. It's you got some highs and you got some lows, and but it's not because you are making bad decisions necessarily. It's because this is something that your brain is dealing with. Does that make sense?
I think so, Becky. And what I get from from the work that I know that you do, and sorry, what I should have done when I introduced you was tell everybody what you do. I just assume everybody knows what you do. Becky is a well, Becky, would you like to talk about what you do?
Well, it depends on who is hiring me, but I am mostly an advocacy consultant for nonprofits and mostly in the realm of healthcare or health conditions, or and a little bit of K-12. But most of the K-12 clients I have are also related to health. So I deal in health. I don't venture into transportation and all kinds of other stuff. Just
Well, and
health.
I also know that you are a nurse, or
Yes,
you have and a professor. You've taught nurses
I did.
to be
Yes,
nurses. So you
yes.
have a unique background to be in the work that you're doing right now. And I love that you're here sharing this with us. How important is it, Becky? And I think I know where you're going to go with I think you don't know where I'm going with this, but I think I know your answer. How important is it for those of us in recovery to continue to tell our stories so that we can change the minds of the delegates, the senators, and the governor's office? How important is that?
It's job one. That's basically
It's
it.
it.
It's
Okay.
job one. It is paramount in importance because
Mm,
you see everything through a lens of recovery. And the more you can communicate that to others, who can also then look at you and know your life history and where you've been and where you're going and where you are. Well, let me say where you've been, where you are, and where you may be going. That's the kind of story. It's a story that we need to communicate to people, and we can't we can't downplay that. That is the most important thing, is to be able to tell the story, and then to reflect on what people are saying in response to your story, because that may help you then be able to enlighten them further and for you to learn from them what they struggle with when they hear any kind of message that you're delivering. But yeah, we can't not stop telling the story.
and that story is that not only is recovery possible, but it is achievable through what we do,
Yeah.
and all the different avenues to recovery. And of course, I work for an organization a peer-led organization where I also found my recovery. So, I'm a strong advocate for the availability of the community-based, authentic peer-to-peer recovery support services, as well as other treatment options. And I have a favorable view of the CSBs and what the work they do is. Um, I want to pivot, Becky, to something that I just saw, and it wasn't on the VACSB list yesterday. So I wonder if the bills, as you know, there was some trouble with LIS, which is the system that tracks all the
Just
bills.
a slight problem.
So we just kind of had a big deluge of bills all at once, didn't we?
Yeah, we're still deluging.
Are you there? Can you hear me? I'm getting feed.
Oh,
Um,
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hold on.
Okay, there was something to your mic.
It's a real hype. There it is. It's gone.
Okay.
Well, anyway, as you know, the LIS was down, so we're getting a big deluge of bills right now. And something I've noticed, and I thought I knew was coming, were 3 bills from Sally Hudson, Delegate Sally Hudson, who represents Charlottesville. As you recall, but think it was the beginning of, was it last year or the year before, she introduced a defelonization bill for simple possession. And that died in the criminal subcommittee. Do you remember that?
That may have been the first year we dealt with that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But,
well, that bill is back.
Oh, good.
It is back. I just pulled it up, and I actually just pulled it up as we were talking. It is HB 612.
Oh, well, so you're way far ahead. I'm at HB 300s in my review of bills.
Well, I haven't gone that far ahead. I just went straight to Hudson because I knew that was coming. Because when we look at the Opioid Abatement Authority bill, which would increase the number of board members to 5, the same bill, I believe, Van Valkenburg is putting in something similar. So we got Nick Freitas, who is a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, and we've got Van Valkenburg, who's a dyed-in-the-wool, is that the right expression? Democrat on one side, offering up the same bill, essentially.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know.
Well, I haven't seen Van Valkenburg's bill yet.
There's room for compromise and discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see that, and I haven't seen Delegate Van Valkenburg's bill yet, but he assured me when I saw him on Monday that it was coming. But looking at Hudson's bill, so Hudson, for those of you who are listening in Virginia, a simple possession charge of a usable amount of a narcotic, and that's pretty much, there's different schedules of narcotics, but Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, which is encompasses a lot of the recreational hard drugs, is punishable up to 10 years in prison. And so what ends up happening there's a lot of feedback, Becky. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, and I don't hear the feedback.
Okay. Well, that's fine then. We'll just keep going. It's punishable up to 10 years in prison. What Delegate Hudson's bill, Sally Hudson in Charlottesville, what her bill would seek to do is to reduce it from, let me read this exactly, from a Class 5 felony to a Class 1 misdemeanor. And then it goes down for Schedule 4 and 5, schedules, all the different schedules of drugs, and reclassifies them, essentially defelonizing drugs. So, as you know, Becky, I just submitted a project proposal for something, and part of that piece for me is defelonization. And included in that package, which I don't think I ever sent you to read, I finished it after I got the letter from you. But part of that, I think that we need to look at drug courts and drug treatment courts and how that they are operating. And I don't know a lot about it. So, we've been talking about this separately with different groups. But I also think that we need to make sure that we're funding effective recovery support services, mental health services that are in the carceral programs. So in the in carceral systems, so that people who are experiencing incarceration have access to mental health, reliable, safe, effective mental health and substance use disorder treatment while incarcerated. So I do think that while I'm in favor of decolonization and reclassification, that I think needs to go hand in hand as well. There are 2 other bills by Hudson. I'm sorry, I'm distracted by that high-pitched noise, Becky, but she has also.
Hear it, so.
Well, hey, HB 618 and HB 619. HB 618 takes possession of controlled substances off of the barrier crimes. So, possession of controlled substances, barrier crimes, removes from the definition of barrier crime a felony violation of possession of a controlled substance. Barrier crimes continue to become a problem for any individual seeking employment, especially within the government system, I suppose, within the executive branch, to become individuals with lived experience. We want individuals with lived experience to share their lived experience to help the next person coming out of addiction, and then we put these barriers up by saying, oh, well, your lived experience is why you can't get hired, but why we want you at the same time. So there's a lot of movement on that, and so I'm encouraged by this bill, and I will be watching that as well. And then the third bill, Becky, from Sally, Delegate Hudson, excuse me, is possession of controlled substances residue, and that provides that for the purpose of the crime of possession of controlled substances. Controlled substance shall not include mere residue of any substance that is not a usable quantity or accountable dosage unit. So that's for all the people who got arrested for, dirty, all the things. I should just say that. And I'm encouraged to see that. Delegate Hudson put one of those bills in, the defelonization bill, last year or the year before. And she had another bill that was just a JLARC study on what legalization would look like in Virginia. Becky, do you remember that bill?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I'm impressed by Sally Hudson, and I see her having a lot of potential. And as you were talking, I was thinking that, part of the transformation journey that I was talking about earlier, if people could look at what she is proposing and think about the potential consequences, even if you believe that they're on the one end where, people should pay for their crimes, yada, 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 and it's moral turpitude and all, whatever, failures. If you can make a case that individuals who are assisted in their recovery journey, even when they're incarcerated, then will probably stand a better chance of being a productive member of society when they get out. If we can remove the barrier crimes from their records so that they can work with others who are experiencing addiction, that will help them to continue to be productive members of society and can lead to helping others. So I guess I'm saying that it could be a win-win for everyone. I'm also somewhat, these crimes that we levied on people have such a racial tinge to them, and we haven't talked about that. But if you go back and look at Jim Crow, for example, let's put people in their place and keep them there. A lot of that stuff came out of the Jim Crow era, and so it's there. I'm thinking of. Sorry, I'm digressing a little bit. I don't know whether you have read Heather. I think it's Heather O'Connor's book. Heather somebody's right now, called "The Sum of Us."
I have not, but I've seen the book.
It's well worth it. And what her premise is that whenever we seek to disenfranchise part of our community, we disenfranchise all of us. So that if you look at areas of the country that have poverty and high incarceration rates for Blacks, for example, those are poor communities. Those are poor states that have terrible health outcomes. And there's all kinds of things that not just for the disenfranchised, but for the entire community. So her point is, if we want to lift everybody up, we've got to get rid of the stuff that got us where we are. It's a fabulous read, and it's very, very provocative. And I keep thinking, Sally Hudson, I believe, believes that, and there are other people who believe that. Yeah, so read it, The Sum of Us.
Some of Us by Heather O'Connor.
Well, I'm making up her last name because
Oh,
I'll get.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, look it up. I would do it, except that would be embarrassing for me to look it up while I'm supposed to be on a podcast with you. But I do know that the title of the book is The Sum of Us.
We'll look it up. I think I've fixed the sound issue, I think. So this is me
Cool.
producing on the fly. So forgive me. I do love that the defelonization bill is there. And what I love about that, you brought that up, the racial element of it. That was such an important factor in the decriminalization and ultimate legalization of recreational cannabis here in Virginia. And that factor hasn't been discussed. And I think there's an opportunity when we get to subcommittee with that bill. I assume it'll go to the criminal subcommittee. It hasn't been assigned, but I'm assuming it will. That we will bring that to the forefront and continue to tell the stories. I'm a person. I'm a person in recovery from a substance use disorder, and I'm a felon as a result of a drug possession conviction. So, and it was my first arrest was a possession charge. I messed up in pretrial by continuing to use, and therefore that first offenders law in Virginia went out the window for me. And I got, I became a felon, a convicted felon. I was probably already a felon beforehand, but that's neither here nor there. And so that this obviously has a lot of importance to me personally, just as helping the next person. And I love that this bill is being discussed. 18 other states have already defelonized, including such Republican bastions as Alaska and Utah and Mississippi. So I think that we have an opportunity here to really dive into that and maybe let the Republicans lead on this. Let it become the bipartisan issue it absolutely should be.
Absolutely.
Which is fine with me. I don't care who carries the bill. I don't care who carries the good stuff, as long as the good stuff gets carried.
Yep.
The other thing I want to talk to you about, we have a new administration coming in, as you know, on Saturday, and we've seen some of the nominees, and so I know very little about John Little. He is the Secretary Presumptive of Health and Human Resources. I said Secretary Presumptive. I don't know if that's an actual title, but presumptive Secretary of HHR, and Sheriff Robert Mosier out of Fauquier County as Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. Do you have any insight into either one of these individuals?
More Little than the other person. I haven't looked up the sheriff yet. I was. I have to say, when I saw his name, I was concerned that I hadn't ever heard about this person. So I started sniffing around, and everyone with whom I have spoken speaks highly of him. And so I am, I'm happy about that. Then out of the blue, I got a text yesterday from the daughter of a woman who I taught years ago, and we maintained a friendship, and then she passed away about a decade ago. But her daughter and I then became friends, and then I kind of we grew apart. Anyway, she texted me yesterday to say that she had finished her PhD and that she's working for some kind of health insurer. But she says, by the way, John Littell is fabulous. He came to my graduation at Old Dominion when I got my doctorate. He's a family friend, and I think he'll be wonderful. And I know, I'm talking about stories now. Remember, we mentioned that before.
Mm-hmm.
So the story I have is of Mary's daughter, whose also name is Mary. And I've known her since she was a child. She now has a doctorate, fully employed, and she knows the secretary and puts in a good word for him. And I also know that he's chairman of the board of the Healthcare Foundation. And I know the person who manages the Healthcare Foundation. So I've communicated with her, and she said he's fabulous. So I'm hopeful that he will he'd be the right person for the job. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Haven't heard about the sheriff. I haven't investigated the sheriff yet. That's coming up.
I welcome more investigation on the sheriff, I spent time in Sheriff Mosier's jail. So,
Oh, okay.
well, but to that point, Sheriff Mosier was a driving force in bringing the jail program into the jail where I was, and
Good.
so yeah, and so I don't know much about him. I don't, I intend to reach out to him and say, hey, I'm grateful for
Graduate of your program.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And see where that goes. But I see people like him. I see people like Carl Leonard, sheriff in Chesterfield, right?
And he's fabulous.
He's who's fantastic. Yeah, right, exactly, fabulous. So there is a shifting, and I think the individuals who are right there, boots on the ground, are seeing, the warehousing. This is very, I'm getting into the warehousing of individuals with a substance use disorder, seeing how ineffective the jail time is, if there is no wraparound services, as part of that. So I'm encouraged by that right now. And the little I know about John, is it Littell?
I don't know. I'm pronouncing it Littell. It's Littel. So
you know what? I like that too.
it's better than little.
Well, I suppose I was at an event with Fillercorn, Van Valkenburg, and Willett the other day, and then of course, Jay Jones was there too, poor guy, and and Shannon Taylor was there, and I was talking to Delegate Willett, who just left, who just was the outgoing chairman of the subcommittee of the health subcommittee in HWI, and he was telling me that he thought John Littell was a fantastic choice. He didn't know much about him, but he knew, what he knew. He said that this guy seems to have a good idea of what he's doing and knows his stuff, and probably would make a really good, secretary. And I've seen that. It was what I saw. Two Democratic leaders. I'm thinking. I read the paper the other day, and I forget who it was that said this. Well, one was, I believe, Craig Deeds, who said, "Well, he's not gonna." He essentially said he's not going to screw up. I'm going to misquote Craig Deeds, and I don't want to do that.
He has a very interesting way of describing things, Craig Deeds.
He does, and but he essentially said, he'd be doing a good job, but regardless of who was in the position, they're going to be drinking out of the fire hose.
Oh my goodness, I know. Yeah, considering that, I think all of the agency heads in HHR are leaving. Because they're all political appointments. And so all of that will change over in the next month or so. So Mr. Secretary Littell does have his work cut out for him in creating a whole new cadre of people who will be running those agencies. And, they're quite, there's a lot of money invested in them. So, for example, DMAS, the Medicaid agency, a lot of money that goes through that. So it's going to be an interesting trip.
Where do you think the advocacy, or I should say, where is the advocacy at the executive branch level? How do those of us who are in recovery and maybe just want to be getting our feet wet in advocacy? How do we effectively advocate for recovery and recovery programs at the executive branch level, at the governor's office, et cetera?
When I said earlier, and that's a great question, I'm glad you asked that question, because I was just thinking that one of the other points that I believe I need to make is that relationships, and this, Nathan, you're this kind of person yourself, relationships are extremely important. And that means, whereas telling the story is job one, I'll still stick with that, but it's how and who you tell the story to and with. And so if you want to effect change in regulations in various agencies, which is, the regulations are executive branch functions, then you get to know the people who are working in those areas and develop relationships with them. So, for example, as I'm listening to my former student's daughter who knows John Littell, I'm thinking, when I meet him, I am going to say her name. so that he can then make the connection. Part of that is a story, but part of it's also developing the relationship. And that's what you do if you want to effect change. You make a cold call the first time when you're getting to meet them, but you've got to get the call warm. And so the subsequent calls are what makes the relationship warm. And if you want something done, you get to know the people who are then going to do it. And that holds true for policymakers in the legislative branch, and it holds true for policy implementers in the executive branch. And because they're the ones who are boots on the ground doing the work, and they need to know, what you experience, how you're experiencing it, and how you could what keeps you awake at night. What would you like to see changed but you can't say that the first time around. You get to know them before you need them. So yes, it's the same there as it is in every other thing that you do. Seriously, no different. If you want something done, you get to know the person that's holding the lever that will help you get things done. You don't just go in there and say, yeah, we need to do this. Because you know that the person you're telling that to is like, who are you and what are you doing here? But you get to know them, and then you can say, we need to do this. They'll say, yeah, you've got a bank of experience of working with this person.
Well, that's fantastic. And I want to give an example of where that becomes where for me, at least, it seems important to continue relationships, even when people vote against what I want them to vote, how I would like them to vote. Yeah. And because of course it's going to happen. Right. For example, I was able to cold call and then sit with Jason Miyares for 15 minutes or so when he was a delegate, still. And it was about a bill that ended up not passing anyway, but he voted the opposite direction. I forget what we were doing. I forget what that bill was, but I actually sat with him and he asked some really good questions and we talked and he was really friendly. He's respectful and I left feeling heard, which was nice.
Yes.
And then, he voted the wrong way, in my opinion, my little humble opinion. But later on down the road, it was last year, he posted, put a overdose awareness day proclamation bill. I forget exactly what it was, but he had used the terminology substance abuse disorder. And I thought, well, there's an opportunity. Maybe he'll change it to substance use disorder. And so I wrote to him, and guess what? He amended his own bill. And I was really appreciative of that because, we're not going to agree on everything. He was totally wrong, straight up on that bill. I get that. But I do understand that he's not coming from a sense of trying to destroy or holding a moral conviction against me. And I'm not going to do the same to him either, and he's now going to be the attorney general. He's somebody we want to be able to work with effectively.
Yeah.
And I think that there's opportunities. I think there's absolutely points of intersection. Absolutely. Where public safety, public health, come into place in a way better way of dealing things than they have been dealt with in the past.
And the other lesson there is you never burn your bridges.
Absolutely.
Because you never know down the road who you're going to need and what you're going to need. And, for people like me who grew up speaking before I actually thought of what I needed to say.
I can relate.
Somebody said, one of my teachers said to me one day, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and she said, your mouth is bigger than Pennsylvania's Grand Canyon. And I'll never forget that. But her point was, chill, Becky. And I have to say, I think I've learned that, but it has been a long journey for me to learn that. Because I don't do my clients any favor if I tell somebody what I really think. I'm much better at trying to learn what the other side is saying and, letting it go and then coming back and working on it some more. So, yeah, don't burn your bridges. And it's tough.
Well, Becky, there's two things that I can relate from my recovery, my program of recovery. That come to mind when you shared that, And the first is one of the things I often tell when I talk about gratitude, especially when I'm in a group with newcomers, new people to recovery. I often talk about the things I'm grateful for, and I'll speak about that I'm very grateful my first thought does not have to be my last thought.
Yeah.
And that's like when that came to my mind, whatever it was a long time ago, I'm like, that is so often the thing that I'm so grateful for, in moments. And the second thing from my recovery, in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, there is a prayer for the 11th step. And from my Catholic tradition, there's the prayer of St. Francis. And they're the same prayer, essentially. The Catholic version goes, O Divine Master, grant that I may seek not so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in parting that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born again to life everlasting. And that understand part, seek to understand, not to be understood, is very often where I go when I'm in difficult situations with people who just don't see what I want them to see.
Yeah. Darn it.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer. I grew up with this belief that when you look for the good in people, you find the good in people. When you look for the bad in people, you find the bad in people.
Yep.
And I did grow up with we were just talking, my Uncle Jimmy and I were just talking about this, with the service before self. Others before self. That, I never heard my grandfather say that, but it was absolutely a driving factor in my life. And I see that and my uncle said that he said that all the time. And I see that with so many people in recovery and so many people who work in this healthcare, in healthcare period, really, and work in this field where it can often seem thankless. We can often feel siloed. We can sometimes shoot each other in the foot, without realizing it. We're working against each other. And I think there are so many more ways that we find when we seek to find togetherness, we find that. So anyway,
absolutely.
I have started to ramble, Becky, which means to me, it might be time for us to wrap up on this call because I know we have other things to do this afternoon, but any final thoughts about where this session might be going and some of the wins that we can look forward to?
No, I have no thoughts.
Okay.
Seriously, it's too early. I'm trying to maintain an open perspective on, just as you were talking about, it's better to understand than to be understood. It's those sorts of things. St. Francis's prayer is a very timely prayer for patience, Becky. Patience. We all need to have some patience, and it for us. Finally, last thing. Last year our legislative session was all virtual, and we lost the touch.
Yeah.
We lost the connections. And I have to say, the best thing about being back in that horrible General Assembly Pocahontas building with all of its challenges is to be able to see people again and to talk with them. And it's just said the other day, I got more done in 10 minutes walking down the hall than I did in 2 days last year when you call, text, make appointments to talk with them over Zoom. It was okay, but this is the relationships, as I mentioned before, are so important, and being able to see and touch is just an incredible thing. So if I get nothing out of it this time, it's being able to rekindle that over the next few weeks.
I love it. You just brought up another final question I have for you, Becky. Where do you park? It's so expensive.
I will tell you, I have a garage right next to my building, so I pay for the parking there. But there are places where you can park. If you get there early enough, Nathan, you can park less expensive. But you're right; it is a challenge.
It is a challenge. That has been the one thing with the Zoom calls and the Zoom testifying that
has been lovely.
Wonderful. Yeah, but I miss the personal stuff too. I miss walking the halls, and I'll be doing that next week. Just going and saying hello, and
I look forward to seeing you. Let me know. Text me when you get into the building.
I will. But anyway, our special guest today is Becky Bowers-Lanier, and I always love having a conversation with you. I always leave feeling more hopeful and a little bit more knowledgeable, and I appreciate that. If you all have any questions, throw them in the comments, and I'll be glad to see if we can't get back to you on that. And just want to say again, thank you, Becky. Appreciate you for coming on, and I guess that's it.
I've enjoyed it. I'm so happy that we had this opportunity, Nathan.
It is so weird not having Justin here. I'm waiting. I'm looking over here thinking he's going to be waving at me, telling me to do something, and he's not. And so now I'm sitting here. I'm taking my time to figure out how to turn this bloody thing off. I think if I just hit end broadcast, but I think I have to put a video out. Becky, this is having a producer is a wonderful thing. Let me tell you. And let's see. Let's get where is the. I don't know how to do this. So let me see. Banners. Oh, there it is. I found it. Hey, Becky, it was really great to see you. I think this is going to outro us. Have a good day. Thank you, everybody.
You too, Nathan. Bye-bye.
Here at McShin, we believe in the McShin way, which is authentic recovery support service providers, people with lived experience, bringing that experience to those who need that lived experience in recovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in many things to support our mission. We believe in women empowerment.
What I love most about what we believe here at McShin is we believe in the authenticity of the peer-to-peer approach.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in giving people opportunity.
Here at McShin, we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
At the McShin Foundation, we believe in helping people reach their full potential.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in multiple pathways to recovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in placing principles before personalities to help spread hope.
Here at McShin, we believe that recovery is possible and that any person seeking recovery can become a more acceptable, responsible, and productive member of society.
Here at the McShin Foundation, we believe in self-discovery.
Here at McShin, we believe in saving lives and offering second chances.
Here at McShin, we believe you can do this.
Here at McShin Foundation, we believe that we can only keep what we have by giving away, which is why we continue to help others like us seek and find recovery.